the mighty and resilient Merrimack River, carving through the communities of our great region. My name is Linda Lorden, proud president of Merrimack County Savings Bank, and like the river that serves as our namesake, we're a constant yet ever-changing presence. Because to us, it's bigger than banking. It's about powering communities and putting people first. It's about knowing where you came from and where you're going. That's Merrimack style. Visit us at themerrimack.com.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Edmondson, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Anthony Ames, Sarah's husband, a.k.a. Nippy.
And we're here to talk about things that are a little bit culty. Speaking of, we were in a cult, and we woke up, thank goodness, and we have a lot to say.
And a lot to ask.
This podcast is going to be a deep dive into everything from the red flags to the narcissism, the manipulation, the resiliency, the recovery process, and everything in between. Also, we want to share some of the good we got out of it so you can get all the nuggets without having to join a cult.
If you haven't already, because there are a lot of things out there that are just a little bit culty.
Welcome to A Little Bit Culty, a podcast about the fads, beliefs, and trends that blur the line between healthy and a little bit culty. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And find us on Instagram if you have any suggestions for things you have found to be a little bit culty.
Under the surface, the water fills my lungs. This ground I worship has swallowed up its young. And you give for a promise I can't keep.
Well, let's get into this.
Let's get into it. I'm so excited. It's a big day.
It is a big day.
It's a big day. Everything's coming full circle.
Since our last recording, we've had a child turn 2.
Ace turned 2.
Has a recurring role on...
We can't say what it is.
A show, which
He's
we're
a
on set.
recurring role on a major Netflix.
He's a little baller.
He's a baller. And he's actually worked more in film and television than Nippy and I put together
as he
this year.
should. Let's be honest. I mean, so Sarah can attest. I'm pretty good with my memory, but when it comes to names that she throws at me, I forget. And I asked her the other day, I was like, we can do that Pet Shop Boys podcast?
I was like, Preacher Boys.
They were just forever the Pet Shop Boys to me, which I would like to do a podcast.
I don't know if we can bridge the cult gap with the Pet Shop Boys.
I'm sure we can find something.
We'll find a way in.
And the other one was Nick
Vial.
That was
the Vial
probably
Files.
Just because his demeanor's pretty chill and cool. We had a really good long interview that didn't have any lulls in it, as far as I could tell.
No, I thought it was great.
I just liked him. He's a good dude.
Good dude. Anyway, there's been lots happening in the Edmondson Ames household, but also in the cultiverse. I'm honestly, for anyone listening who has emailed us and have not responded yet, I apologize. We're going to get on that this week.
Yeah, we're reaching our max capacity in terms of responding to people.
Yes.
It's time to delegate.
I think I have a what chaps my ass. So in NXIVM, there's a lot of feedback. And the higher up the ranks you went, the more you basically agreed that you would always be like available and open for feedback, which is a slippery slope because, you know, if you're in a system where people are truly there to support your growth and help you, of course you want feedback. But if it's also a system for gaslighting and abuse.
It was a slippery slope. It turned into a fucking luge.
A landslide.
Yeah.
It turned into a landslide. And here's one of the things I remember happening in my early years is I was in a training called Level 2A. We had these they're called mentor groups. And there was somebody in my group who gave me the feedback that I looked angry. And I didn't feel angry at all. In fact, I was surprised that she said I looked angry.
And now you're angry.
Oh, then well, that's what happened.
Yeah,
thanks for jumping to the punchline.
Dude,
Lauren had to come over and I was like, but she's giving me feedback that I'm angry. I'm not angry. And the line was, all feedback's valid. All feedback is valid.
Well, that's when you should have been like, you're a fucking asshole.
I should have.
And be like, all feedback's valid.
Which reminds me, that's the Seinfeld episode where what's his name? George Costanza. Sorry, brain fart.
And for those of you who don't know listening, Seinfeld was a really big show in the 90s. Carry on.
Oh, thanks. Where he obsesses about what he would say after the fact. I obsess. Not as much anymore, but certainly for the first few years out of NXIVM, I'm obsessed about the things I would say after the fact to all these people, which reminds me, I had an incident at the park the other day with Ace and this little kid who his parents are just kind of ornery and not super friendly. And Ace went over and he's 2, went over and smashed this kid's, not even a castle. It was an upside down bucket castle of sand. You know what I mean? Like you can make a little pile.
Kids destroy kids' castles. Yeah, I mean,
so
that's
Ace,
the point.
So Ace went over and playfully destroyed it. And I went over and just to make kind of things light with this couple, I was like, oh, sorry about that. Hey, Ace, let's leave other people's castles alone. And the man looked at me, the father of the little boy, and said, well, it's not the first time that's happened. And I was like, what? Oh, okay.
It's not going to be the last.
I was like, okay, Ace, let's go to a part of the playground where we feel welcome, and was sort of passive aggressive about it. But what I want to say now is to him, oh, would you like me to build you a new one? It's also passive aggressive, I guess.
No,
but
I would go straight at him.
I was like, seriously, guys, this is sand. These are kids. Are you going to micromanage every interaction?
Evidently.
Anyway, all feedback is valid is something that really chaps my ass, because it gave them permission to give you feedback at any time about anything, even if it wasn't accurate for you. And if you had a reaction to it, which I did, being like, that's not true for me, then they would say, well, now you're having a reaction. And so obviously there's something in there that's important for you to look at. So that's what you need to go work on. I jumped ahead to what chaps my ass. So, and also just to wrap up a few things, just circling back to previous episodes, there was a lot of positive feedback, especially about the shoe conversation and the shoes that you gave me. And for those who missed it, I did post a picture of the gold shoes in my Instagram stories, so you can see those beauties.
You can see how we roll in the Ames house. And
also wanted you to know that Nippy's shoe collection is on a special shelf that he refers to as
my portfolio. But here's the thing. You shouldn't be talking about that.
Oh.
In fact, you probably shouldn't even be looking at my portfolio. They're for my eyes only. I let you into my closet.
See, guys, this is the remnants.
I scale it.
This is the remnants of our time.
You can't handle it all at once.
This is probably remnants of the brainwashing that we endured in NXIVM. Nippy feels like he's better than. There's a shoe hierarchy, kind of like the straight path, but there's a Nike straight path.
You know what? First rule of Shoe Club.
Don't talk about it.
You don't talk about it.
Okay.
You know what the single best piece of feedback was?
What?
I read one of our reviews.
Yeah.
And it said, my voice is like honey.
And Nippy doesn't even do voice work professionally.
Herein lies the problem.
What?
You're the voiceover
know.
person in this house. And you've been married to someone with a voice like honey this whole time. And you haven't helped me monetize my sweet flowing nectar.
That just sounds so off.
It's my voice.
I know. The segue is natural. All feedback's valid. Of course, doesn't apply to NXIVM when people said to us when we were in it, wow, it sounds like a pyramid scheme. Or is this an MLM? And we were trained to say, no, it's not an MLM, because MLMs are inherently unethical. And pyramid scheme, of course, implies that there's a scheme. This is not a scheme. It is the most ethical way to do business. Because
here's our confusing business model.
yeah, which nobody can understand. Yeah. By the way, there came a point where I was Nippy's field trainer, which probably won't mean anything to anybody, but I basically was helping him with sales. It was a position in the company. And he'd be like, wait, can you just explain to me again?
every
day. Month, he'd be like, how is this working? And I'd be like, oh my God, Nippy. But it was confusing.
It was totally confusing.
So when we started the Little Bit Culty podcast and we put it out there to the listeners, please tell us about things you want us to talk about and to determine what's culty and not. I think the request that we got most often, more than anything else, was to do an episode about MLMs. Mm-hmm. And first of all, we didn't know who to talk to about that. I personally have some experience, which I can relate to, separate from NXIVM, just with friends and in various MLMs.
It's amazing how I sniffed those out, but not the one I was in.
I know. When they invite you to different parties and essential oil classes and jewelry parties. And it's largely with women. And I've in my research to prepare this episode, have discovered why, and perhaps we'll talk about that with our guest. But Douglas Brooks is definitely the person that we need to be talking to for a number of reasons. And not only is he an expert in the field, but he has experience with NXIVM. So I'm super excited to talk to him. He's actually an attorney. He's dedicated a significant portion of his practice to representing the victims of deceptive MLM schemes, including such cases as Webster versus Omnitrition International, Rhodes versus Consumers Byline, which was the case against Keith's first business before he started NXIVM, Jacobs versus Herbalife International.
He's interviewed or deposed hundreds of participants in MLM schemes, reviewed tens of thousands of documents which were produced by MLM firms subject to confidentiality orders, and studied the compensation plans of scores of MLM companies, which is basically to say he knows what he's talking about.
And if anyone doesn't know what a compensation plan is, that's the payment structure of how people get paid in MLMs, which are
largely confusing,
but also where the deception lies. He's also worked pro bono for a number of nonprofit organizations, including the effort to educate and protect consumers from deceptive and fraudulent MLM schemes, including Pyramid Scheme Alert, www.pyramidschemealert.org, and the Consumer Awareness Institute, www.mlm-thetruth.com.
Douglas Brooks, welcome.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Doug Brooks,
Hello.
thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you on because we have a zillion questions for you. I hope you've had as much caffeine as we have.
Yeah, I've had my quota for the day.
Yeah.
When we decided to do this podcast and we put it out to the universe and our audience, what culty things do people want to know about that we could look at? So many people wrote us saying, would you please do an episode on MLMs? And I found that quite shocking, actually, more than any other culty thing. We got bombarded with it. And so many people told me things like personal stories of saying that they lost friends to different schemes and different groups and, trying to sell them stuff. Obviously I can see correlations right off the bat, but one of the things that we want to do with the podcast is to look at, what makes a healthy group that's dedicated to something. When does it turn south and become bad? Where's the deception? Where's the thing that makes it what we know as a cult, like a bad cult versus a group of people excited about this similar cause? When our mutual friend Ken suggested that we speak, we were so excited because what we were looking for was somebody just like you as an expert in this field. And we have so many questions, but the first thing we wanted to ask was, how did you become a lawyer that became an expert in MLMs? Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I guess my first MLM cases I filed in the early 1990s. Before then, in the 80s, I had worked in a firm that specialized in franchise law. And we represented franchisees and distributors in traditional, organizations across the country. But I think it was 1992, one of my fellow lawyers in that firm, we branched off. We left that firm and we started our own firm. And we thought we would continue doing, franchise cases. Since we had no money to pay the rent or anything like that, we shared office space with another firm in exchange for our time. And this was a firm that did a lot of class action work. And they had just filed a bunch of cases against multi-level marketing companies alleging that they were pyramid schemes. And they didn't quite know what to do with these cases. And then we felt, well, geez, with our background in franchise law, we ought to be able to figure out, these cases pretty easily. And then quickly found out that multi-level marketing is an entirely different animal. It's not really a product distribution system at all. It really is a recruiting game. We got further and further into it, and I took a particular interest in these cases, and I just sort of grew from there. I mean, I've done many, many different types of cases, class actions and other types of cases. It was these pyramid scheme cases that really sort of got my gut. And now that I'm sort of semi-retired, I spend most of my professional time on these cases, on arguing for better regulation and transparency in the industry, and representing consumer advocates pro bono who get threatened or sued by multi-level marketing companies. And I'm in the process of working with a group of folks that we're organizing a conference on the multi-level marketing industry that will be taking place April 30th and May 1st this year. We've got speakers lined up from the Federal Trade Commission, from international regulators, academics, consumer advocates, social media folks. all focused on the problems caused by this industry.
We'll make sure to include the information about that workshop in our show notes so people can check that out. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that you, and one of the reasons we were excited to speak to you as our MLM expert, is that you actually first heard about Keith Raniere, I'm understanding, through Consumers Byline, his venture before NXIVM. And I'd love to hear your perspective on that. And, you know, obviously our podcast isn't just about NXIVM, but that's our background. So when we joined, as you know, 2005 for me and 2001 for Nippy, there wasn't a ton of bad press yet, but there were, if you knew how to dig around on the internet, which was also still pretty new back then, you could find some information about his original company called Consumers Byline International, which from what I was told was a buying group similar to something like Costco that could get goods to people at a much more discounted rate. In other words, Keith recognized that there was unethical behaviors in the market, and the market prices were so driven. And he also understood that so many people, I don't remember the number of Americans, were in debt, and he wanted to change that. He was such a noble, ethical man that he wanted to change the whole system. So he found a way to get goods at a discounted rate by buying it in bulk and then delivering it to his membership. There was also a recruitment of selling memberships to people. So the membership was really, really cheap. And then you had access to all these goods at a totally discounted rate. And that this was such a noble way of helping Americans that, of course, it got shut down by a number of attorney generals. And was it in Arkansas or something?
So the story was, this is when I went and asked him directly, because my reservations were around what happened there. And the story they told us is that 22 district attorneys in 22 separate states filed a lawsuit against him. And that when he went out to Arkansas, that representatives from Walmart and someone related to the Clinton administration that he wouldn't say, he presented his not saying it as honorable. Like he didn't want to out the person. And he's like, they offered me $5 million to take my company outside their state and shut it down. And I wouldn't take the money. And when he told me that, and I went and checked with other people, they were like, yeah, apparently one of Clinton's lawyers in the Walmart family didn't want his model because it was going to put them out of business. And this is what they sold people that enrolled. They sold Consumer Bylines as a successful business. Yeah.
He said they used to tell us that he did, I don't remember the number, but like X billion amount, 50 million in his first year or second year of business or something. It did so well that it was a threat to capitalism, I guess.
No, it was a threat to people that wanted to control the market.
So that's what we were told. And Nippy thinks I'm crazy, but every time I do these podcasts, I'm also trying to reach the 20 remaining loyalists who haven't seen the full picture yet. Well, because if I had known what I think you're about to tell me, I would have run the other way. So what was CBI actually?
CBI was a cleverly designed pyramid scheme. It was portrayed as a multi-level marketing company in which the product was membership in a buying club. You would become a member of this buying club, and then you would also recruit other people to become members of the buying club. And the reason I call it clever gets into sort of the intricacies of how multi-level marketing companies are designed. We can get into that later, but the basic product, this buying club, we learned in Discovery was created by an entirely separate company called, I think it was Purchase Power Inc., a company that had been in business long before CBI. And they sold discount buying memberships to corporations that they could offer as, employee benefits or something like that. And the basic price was something like $20 a year. CBI sold those memberships for something like $200 a year. The idea that there was some benefit to joining CBI is a little questionable. That extra money, the $180 or so dollars, that went to basically to pay commissions to the people that joined. And following a typical multi-level marketing structure, most of those commissions went to the people at the very top, and very little went to everyone else. And I think at its peak, CBI had somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 members. And with an MLM, those numbers constantly fluctuate because people are constantly dropping out. I mean, the sort of grandiose notion that this is something that's going to upend capitalism, or the idea that Walmart would have paid some huge sum of money for Keith to walk away from the business is sort of ridiculous. Certainly nothing like that came up in discovery. I've never heard that before. Really what happened in the case is that, we filed our complaint, I think it was 1992. The main defense that CBI raised was they had an arbitration clause in the distributor agreement. So this is a clause that says you can't sue us, you have to arbitrate, and you can't do it as a class action. And so that was their main defense. We had adequately alleged that they were a pyramid scheme. A pyramid scheme violates New York state public policy, and therefore the judge would not enforce a contract that violated public policy. Sort of a technical legal thing. CBI appealed that to the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and while that appeal was pending, the New York State Attorney General filed a complaint. And they sort of doffed their hat to us because they used some of the information or some of the allegations in our complaint. They modeled their complaint based in part on that. And essentially, they were able to shut CBI down. There had been a number of state actions against CBI before this, but they only affected their own states. Arkansas can only protect Arkansas consumers. But because CBI was located in New York, New York was able to shut them down completely.
Such a different story than what we were told.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. There was a creative aspect to how it was designed, but it was basically the same model that MLM has followed since the 1950s.
I don't know if you know this, but Keith proudly in his teaching of sales shared that he did sell encyclopedias door to door and did do Amway and tried all the different models and had decided that MLMs were inherently unethical, which is why when I joined NXIVM and people would say, oh, it looks like a pyramid scheme or it's an MLM. And I talked to the leadership about that. They said it's not an MLM because MLMs are unethical and this system is not. So before I even get into that, can you very quickly define MLM versus pyramid scheme versus direct selling as best you can?
Direct selling is the easy one. Direct selling is person-to-person selling other than from a fixed retail location. The old door-to-door salesman, the direct seller, sometimes he actually owns the stuff that he's selling, so he buys it from the company and then resells it to the customer. Sometimes he just writes up an order, like the encyclopedia salesman. He doesn't own the encyclopedia he's selling to you. He just writes up the order, and then the company delivers it to you and then pays him a commission. And maybe there's a regional manager who gets a piece of that commission. Maybe there's a zone manager who gets a smaller piece of that commission. But so there might be, 2 or 3 levels of management that get a piece of that commission. But the guy that actually makes the sale gets the biggest cut.
Okay. And that's ethical.
That's ethical. Direct selling is as American as apple pie. It's been around for thousands of years. There's just nothing wrong with it. Multi-level marketing likes to portray itself as direct selling. But the way multi-level marketing works is when you become a distributor, you not only get the right to buy and sell the products that are advertised or marketed by this company, you also get the right to recruit other distributors. And you get the right to sell them the right to recruit other distributors, and on, so that you can recruit what they call a large downline of distributors below you. And every time one of those distributors buys a product from the company, you get a commission. So you could say, in one way, that MLM is a type of direct selling in which the distributors can recruit other distributors. Not to get too technical, I don't even think it really is direct selling at all, because the focus really is on recruiting. Every time you look at an MLM company, people are not making money by selling products. The people that are making lots of money are successful recruiters. So it really is a recruiting game.
So the distinction is as a distributor, I am not making money off my product. I'm making money off the effort of other people.
Yes. And the issue of pyramid scheme, a pyramid scheme is an arrangement where participants pay money for the right to recruit people and receive compensation that is not primarily related to retail sales. MLM companies very often are accused of being pyramid schemes. And certainly in my experience, essentially everyone that I've looked at has turned out to be a pyramid scheme. At least under that definition, because the emphasis is on recruiting. The people at the top are making a lot of money from recruiting.
Right.
The people at the bottom are constantly churning in and out, losing what they put into it. And the incentives of the compensation plan are all in favor of recruiting rather than retailing. And in order to earn commissions based on your downline, that downline that you recruited, you have to keep on buying stuff. Every MLM I've ever looked at, there is some kind of purchase qualification in order to earn commissions. If you interview an MLM company, they will swear on a stack of Bibles that they do not require purchases. But if you look at their comp plan, what you find is that, in effect, in order to really participate, in order to earn those commissions, you've got to buy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, theoretically, you could just get in and not buy anything. And yeah, no one's going to hold a gun to your head and say you have to buy something. But in order to reap the benefits of being in the plan, you've got to buy stuff. And those purchases are the things that drives the success of the company. The longer you keep people in, the more people you recruit, the more successful the MLM is going to be.
So what I'm hearing you saying, pyramid scheme is synonymous for you with MLM to a degree.
Yeah, I don't want to go that far.
Okay.
What I'll say is everyone I've looked at so far.
Right. What I'm understanding for myself, because I agreed when people wrote to me that MLMs can be culty and the division of friendships are similar in terms of like having a friend in a cult is very similar to having a friend who's trying to sell you X, Y, and Z out of their garage, right? And the distinction I'm coming to terms with for myself is that and tell me if this is accurate, is that the cult that is destructive is destructive because there is a deception and there's a lie. And the deceptive lie that is also part of MLMs, that the ones that you've looked at, is that it's not true what they're saying. And what they're saying is you can make a lot of money, and they're promising financial freedom, and they're promising all these things that are actually very, very difficult, if not impossible, or only possible for the 1% at the top who are earning from the efforts of the 99% worker bees.
And you have it. I mean, and that's one of the sort of the tragic things about this is because people, they get involved and they start recruiting their friends and their family, turning those personal relationships into commercial relationships. And then they find out after a while that they're really not being successful. They're losing money. And not only are they losing money, but the people that they brought into it are losing money. So they not only have harmed themselves, they've harmed other people. They're not only victims, they're also perpetrators. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of one of the things that sets this apart from other types of consumer fraud is that the MLM process turns people into recruiters even before they really understand what they're getting into. I mean, one of the first things they have you do is make a list of all the people you know. And because you're going to be, you want to share this opportunity with them. This is such a wonderful thing. We are going to change the world and make it a better place. And it would be wrong not to share this with your friends and family.
And everything that you just said was also said to us,
in
right?
some shape or form.
In some shape or form in NXIVM as well. Like, as soon as you did the 5-day, like, wasn't this training amazing? And everyone's like, yeah, because they're all high off the experience. And then, can you think of who else in your life would you want to share this program with? And we're all writing lists because not only, at least for me, was I 100% truthfully so enamored with the whole thing, and I did want to share it with everybody. But if you shared it with 3 people within, at the time it was 3 months, you got your entire tuition back.
Which was impossible.
I did it because I was such a good recruiter, which is something I've also come into terms with this whole debacle. And I don't say this proudly. It's part of my
Well, your skill set was abused.
my skill set was abused. But when I say I was a star recruiter or whatever, however I'm portrayed in the media, I'm not saying that because I'm proud of it. I'm saying it because I'm trying to take ownership of it so I can own it, that I did that and learn from it and teach people why it's bad so that other people don't make the same mistake that I did. So that's largely why we're doing all of this, the podcast and everything.
Well, I mean, ultimately, this is all about abuses of power.
Yeah.
The through line with everything from we've talked to people in Scientology, we've talked to people, and what you're saying and other domains, it's always about abuses of power. And one of the things that's particularly interesting about this is is there a world where these types of companies can be ethical? Have any of them come close? What are they missing? It seems to me from what I've listened to in your work is that ultimately they don't, because the numbers you end up exceeding the number of people on planet in order to.
There's a term for that too, right? The concept that there will come a time where the recruitment pool will dry up, right?
I like to compare this to an issue with franchising. When I did franchise cases, one of the types of cases that we handled, we called them cannibalization cases. Those are cases where one franchise store is located too close to another store, so it has an impact. And one of my most famous franchise case was a case called Sheck versus Burger King, where I represented this Burger King franchisee, and Burger King opened a location that cut his sales. I forget what the percentage was. Basically, it made a profitable store into a loser. And we sued. The judge ultimately ruled that there's a covenant of good faith and fair dealing. So even though Burger King didn't grant protected territories, it didn't give Burger King the right to build a store anywhere it wanted if it was going to harm an existing franchisee. But the point of that is that franchisees in normal systems, distributors in normal systems, don't want there to be a lot of other distributors because that's competition. Ideally, you want to have an exclusive. And if you can't get an exclusive, you at least want a limit on the number of other distributors. With multi-level marketing, this gets turned on its head. The distributors are recruiting other distributors. And if you're in the business of retailing products, the last thing you want is a million other people that are selling the same thing at the same price to the same people. And that's what makes this thing impossible to work as a form of retailing, as a form of product distribution. Because in a viable distribution system, the company has to be happy, but the franchisee or the distributor has to be happy too. Everybody has to be able to have a reasonable chance of making a profit. But with MLM, you really can't make money retailing because you've got all these other people out there who are selling the same thing. You could have a perfectly wonderful product, and some of them are and some of them aren't. If there's a million other people out there selling the same thing, maybe you're going to be selling it at cost, maybe you're going to be selling at a loss, but you're not going to be able to make the kind of profits that you need to have a functional business. And if you look at any MLM, what you see is over and over again, the people at the top, the people that are marching out onto the stage and talking about all the money that they're making, the money that they're making is commissions from their downline. They're not making a lot of money retailing the product. So again, I apologize if I've gone off on that.
No, you actually just reminded me that it's true. Where I ran the center in Vancouver, as you know, and that was a huge problem because it's a small community here, and ultimately people would hear about NXIVM, and there'd be fights over who was going to be the sponsor for somebody because you had to fill out on your form when you're signing up for a 5-day. All your information, and you have to say who is responsible for you coming. And someone would come to me and be like, well, I heard about it from this person. I met them on set, and I heard about it from that person at a party. But ultimately I came to your intro, Sarah, and I heard it from you. But I wouldn't take credit because that was my job to put on info nights. Right. So I have to figure out, well, who told you about it? And then people would fight over people. Well, I told them about it first, but the other person convinced them to sign up and got them to sign the paperwork. It was that kind of crazy dynamics that was so toxic. I feel like, and this is something that I brought up with you on the phone when I first introduced myself to you, that I feel like I have to say and I'm hesitant to say it, but I feel like I have to, that I was in an MLM before I even got into NXIVM. And the story behind that is that when I was in university in the 90s, somebody very close to me had success with an MLM and put me in their downline so that when I came out of university, I'd have another stream of income. And so when I came out of it, I was like, what's this? And took the products and enjoyed the products and didn't do much with it till I needed a side hustle to my acting. And I gave it a go. And I didn't get very far. I don't think I got past the first, the different levels that you have to go up to be successful in an MLM. I liked the product. I did not enjoy the recruitment of other people and to get them into the business. And in fact, put a very large strain on one of my very best friends' relationship because I brought her in and it really wasn't in line with who she was. And I think we've since mended, but wow, that was a really painful juncture for us. But it did teach me a lot about kind of basics in regards to some of the skills that people need to be successful in an MLM in terms of follow-up and the hustle but ultimately, what I have had to come to terms with both that company, which I'm going to not mention because I still have family and friends involved in it. And I don't want to cause more pain, but hopefully maybe they'll listen to this and reevaluate things, I hope. But I had to come to terms with the grossest part and why I will never, ever, ever join anything like this ever again is that every person you meet is potentially a recruit. You sit beside somebody on the plane and you're not just casually getting to know them. You are trying to elicit information about them so that you can sell them a product. So for me with NXIVM, all the hesitations I had about that, and this is what we were then trained to do with other people, is EM them away from that yucky feeling. If you felt uncomfortable about approaching somebody or recruiting somebody, it was just a fear, just something you had to get over. And I would present that to a coach and then I'd get EM'd. And then
the term you just said, EM, what's that?
So an EM is when it was basically the therapeutic process that Keith apparently invented, which I've since learned that he didn't. But it's essentially bringing something to a facilitator that you feel uncomfortable with. Could be anything from anytime somebody gives me feedback, what an EM was designed to do is to overcome an issue.
I think that's the congruency with what he's saying, because in what I've listened to Douglas say is it always comes back to your fault for not being able to grow it. And an EM was basically acknowledgement of you going to someone, hey, it's my issue that I can't do this. And the organization was going to help us with that, in short, right?
There's 2 points there. One is with a point that Nippy just made, which is I've seen that in every MLM. It's you're trained really from the get-go. They tell you, well, this business is not for everyone, and not everyone succeeds. And if you don't follow the plan, you're not going to do good. And then, of course, when you do fail, you know that it's your fault.
It's your issue.
It's not because there aren't enough people on the planet. It's not because you can't make money retailing. It's not because the comp plan is weighted towards the top. It's because some failing on your part. But the other thing, the reason I asked the question to begin with is that this term EM, this is one of the features of MLMs, and I think of cults also, is this whole language, these jargon, this terminology that's developed so that you become this little insular group where only people who are insiders know certain terms, and when you first join, you hear people using these terms and you're not even sure what they're talking about, and you have to be taught what these things are. And it's one way of sort of isolating people in group versus out of group.
Us versus them.
One of the things, Douglas, that we learned in Stephen Hassan's model, the BITE modules, behavior, information, thoughts, emotions. When you load the language, you're in essence controlling people's information and how they transmit the information. So, when we talk about a little bit culty, those are the things that are a little bit culty. So those distinctions are very important.
Leah Remini mentioned this on our episode with her, and she shared with us that one of the reliefs of being out and being free is that you can just meet somebody and just meet them and get to know them without any ulterior motive. And that was one of the first things that I EM'd. I said, I feel like I have an ulterior motive and that doesn't feel right. And the person who AM'd me said, well, you do have another motive, and that is to enroll them. But why is that bad? You want to help them, and you want to help usher them into the best version of themselves. That is a great, beautiful ulterior motive. So that was how that was reframed for me, that it wasn't a bad thing that I saw somebody that way, but I didn't realize how much of a filter that was on every interaction until I no longer had it. And I feel like that's what I want to give to anyone who's listening who might be in an MLM. You don't even know how gross that is. You don't even know how gross that feels to other people. And that's what I wanted to share real quickly, is that I was on an airplane about a year ago with somebody who sat beside me, and I was traveling alone with my baby, and she was so nice to me. And she was hold my baby. So I go to the bathroom, and we became friends. And she elicited my phone number. And later she called me to sell me these products for a MLM cleaning, like toxic, chemical free, which she had mentioned a number of times during the plane ride. And I hadn't bitten because I knew exactly where she was going. But she got my phone number and she called me later to recruit. And I said to her very, very directly, it feels really shitty that you got my number and it's a bait and switch that you're now inviting me to this, because guess what? I've done that to people. And I just want other people to know who might be listening, that's just gross. Like, and that's when if anyone says to me, like, I'm thinking about going to this thing and I might sign up, and I'm like, don't do it. Do not do it. And I'm going to be just as loud about MLMs as I am as cults. So that's
they're a little bit culty.
They are a little bit culty. Actually, I think they're a lot culty. And we're going to get into more of that, but you had a lobbyist question. Go for it, babe.
So one of the things that, in listening to one of your lectures, and the things that are really interesting to me, not just, figuring out how these things are coercive, but the systems in place in our governments that protect them. With Scientology, Scientology was able to manipulate the IRS and the First Amendment. And you mentioned something about the lobbyist groups that exist that protect these things, particularly, I think it was with the MLMs you were talking about. Can you go into the architecture of that and what things in our government are protecting things that aren't good for business, people, abuses?
The primary trade association of multi-level marketing companies is the Direct Selling Association. And notice they use the term direct selling, but I think something like 97% of their membership are multi-level marketing companies. In fact, Tupperware, which is a real direct selling company, they left the DSA a number of years ago, and they released a statement that at the time basically saying that they were leaving because the industry kept on looking more and more like pyramid schemes, and they didn't want to be associated with it.
Well, good for them.
I think at one point Avon had left, similar reasons. The Direct Selling Association is a very effective and sophisticated lobbying group. And the industry itself, at least since the 1970s, has been very well connected politically. Amway, for many years, was one of the biggest single donors to the Republican Party.
Wow.
Reagan spoke to a meeting. Gerald Ford spoke to Amway meetings. Really going way back, the industry has been very politically connected, and they hit way above their weight in terms of influence. Because, in terms of retail sales, they represent maybe less than 1% of retail sales in the country.
Wow.
But their lobbying is very effective. And I'll just give one example. In the mid-1990s, the Federal Trade Commission issued a notice that it was considering issuing a regulation governing business opportunities, including multi-level marketing, similar to the regulation that was already in place regarding franchising. There's a franchise rule that says before you buy a franchise, you have to get a disclosure statement. It's a big, thick volume of information about the franchise opportunity, the finances of the company, the terms of the deal, everything you could possibly want to know has to be disclosed to you before you pay anything. But business opportunities like MLMs were not subject to that rule because basically if your initial payment is less than $500, you're not a franchise. But like I said, in the mid-1990s, the FTC said, we're thinking of doing something similar with other types of business opportunities. And that started a process that took a long time. I and other people, submitted proposals and comments, whether there should be a regulation and what it should look like. And in, I think it was 2005, so like at least 10 years later, the FTC issued a proposed regulation that would have governed MLM. It would have required multi-level marketing companies to provide a disclosure statement to people before they paid any money. And it would have provided a cooling off period. So, you'd get recruited, but before you were allowed to pay anything, you'd have to, wait 5 days or 7 days, something like that. And they would have to give you a disclosure statement. And if they were making earnings claims, they would have to back up those claims and show you, what's the basis for this claim. They'd have to show you the real data. Well, I was very surprised when that regulation was issued because they really hadn't done anything for so many years. But that was great. That would have been wonderful. But the industry, the DSA and the big MLM companies got together and they launched a multi-million-dollar lobbying campaign. Wow. And they got senators and representatives to send letters to the FTC. They got MLM distributors to sort of do these cookie cutter letters. I think they sent like 12 or 15,000 letters to the FTC saying, don't do this. And in any event, about 2 years later, the FTC revised its business opportunity rule to exempt MLMs. And there was another process that took place after that. And finally, the rule didn't become final until 2012. So you can see how long these things take. But MLM was exempted. So MLM, at least in the United States, MLM is the only type of business opportunity that does not have a pre-sale disclosure rule. Every other type of business opportunity, whether it's a franchise or a vending machine or a rack sale or any other type of business opportunity, has to provide pre-sale disclosures, but MLM is exempt.
We tell our stories. We change the world. A Little Bit Culty is proud to support the #IGotOut project, which empowers survivors of cultic abuse to share their stories online as a catalyst for education, prevention, and healing. Learn more about the #IGotOut movement and find resources at igotout.org. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or never miss yoga. Maybe it's getting 8 hours of sleep. I mean, that's my personal and everyone's dream, isn't it? Well, I definitely have some non-negotiables. Like, I'm in Vancouver right now, and I'm spending literally as much time as I can outside in nature. #cold pools, #crushing it. Nature is a non-negotiable. Not enough time in the fresh air and the trees around me, and I start to feel not great, not myself, not grounded. Therapy day is a bit like my nature walks. I try to not miss it, and I know I'm just going to feel so much better all around if I make it a priority. I get so much out of it. It helps me put my worries and anxieties in their rightful place and helps me clear my mind so I can focus on what I really need and sometimes what I don't need. Like, I don't need to be overbooking myself just because I hate to say no to people. You know what I mean? Thanks, therapy. Thanks for helping me see that. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Look, even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/culty today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/culty.
The Frankies were a picture-perfect influencer family. But everything wasn't as it seemed.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here asking for help. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
Infamous is covering Ruby Frankie, the world of Mormonism, and a secret therapy group that ruined lives. Listen to Infamous wherever you get your podcasts.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
So, in short, legislation that applies primarily to MLM and should apply to MLM doesn't apply to them, and applies to ethical companies instead.
Right. And
Wow.
that's a demonstration of the power of basically the pyramid scheme lobby.
Wow.
So, what can you
That's a
tell our
red flag.
viewers about that? What could be done about that outside your work, and how do you heighten awareness around it besides doing a podcast and getting, I mean, that's pretty, that can destroy people's lives unwittingly.
What I tell people, what I hope people will do is if you've had an experience in an MLM, and I'm going to assume it's a bad experience because it is for 99% of the people, it is very easy to file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission. You can go online. I'll have to give you the website. But if you just go to FTC, if you just Google Federal Trade Commission, you'll find it. File a complaint with the FTC. That's step one. Take that same letter that you submit to the FTC and write to your congressman and your senator. The politicians need to hear from the people who are in these things. They're already hearing from the DSA. The DSA, they have offices on K Street in Washington, D.C. They're in the Capitol building every day, knocking on doors. The victims have to be heard. And the way for them to be heard is you have to tell your story. I mean, a lot of times people who are victims of these things, that once they realize that they've been scammed, they just walk away. They're embarrassed, they're afraid, they're ashamed, whatever it is. Get over that.
Doug, that's where I see the other parallel is it's the same thing with cults. When people realize they've been in a cult and they've been duped, they don't want to talk about it. Yeah. They want to pretend it never happened and move on with their lives. And I can totally see why people would get out of a pyramid scheme if they ever do get out and not take any action, because they'd have to admit to themselves that they got conned, which is very difficult, because then you feel stupid and you feel like all the things, of course, Nippy and I went through. But I hope this podcast encourages people to take action and not just, go hide under a rock. But one of the things I wanted to bring up with you, and I know that you've read my book, so thank you for that. The last moment where I saw Keith in the chapter called Illusion of Hope. I don't know if you remember this, but just to back up for a minute, in addition to all of Keith's other schemes around NXIVM, one of the things he came up with in the months before I left was this idea of the point system. So he recognized that most of the people that came to ESP weren't big recruiters, right? So we were taught that out of every 10 students, one would become a coach. And out of every 10 coach, approximately one would become a proctor. Of course, I wanted to be one of those few that made it up the ranks. And as you know from my book, I worked and hustled hard to get up the ranks. And that really worked for me in terms of them dangling that carrot and giving me all the goodies and being special and feeling like I'd really accomplished something and all that stuff. But he recognized that wasn't enough it wasn't enough fresh blood, as he called it, in the company. I know, it's so terrible. So he created this thing called the point system. So to become a salesperson, you had to sell $12,000 worth of curriculum. And most people couldn't do that. And, I first started by telling people I wanted to get my money back. And then someone, actually Barb Boucher, approached me and said, you should become a salesperson and you can earn commission on anything you sell. And it was quite a high commission. Was it 10% or 20%?
I don't remember.
I'm blanking now. God, I've tried to block this out. Quite a high commission. But I believe that they bet on the fact that most people would never get to salespeople. In fact, I was then, when I became a field trainer, I had to grow salespeople, and it was almost impossible. So he came up with this thing called the point system, where the average student could bring somebody in, whatever they sold, 10% of that amount could be used towards future trainings, which at first we were like, wow, what a great idea. I like points. I like points on my credit card. That sounds amazing. But in the first, I'll never forget this. In the first meeting he had with all the field trainers, it was about 12 to 15 of us, he laid out the math. And my math is not like, that's not my strong point. So I'm like doing the math in my head of like, okay, 10% of 5 days, 2,000 says $200, take $200 towards a level 2. Because the idea was that people could earn points to take more curriculum. So it'd be a win-win for the company. More people would come in and the more people would take more curriculum and everyone would be growing and learning. Yay, humanity, right? This other guy, I'm not going to say his name, but had a Harvard MBA, put up his hand before me and said, wait, Keith, hold on. If I'm doing the math correctly here. Oh, because it was also the disclaimer that Keith casually said, well, also these points will expire within a year. And you have to have the total amount of points. Like a level 2 training was $6,000. So you have $600 worth of points in order to get the training for free. So you pay for it entirely in points, not like half points, half cash. And it expires within the year. And this friend of mine, very smart guy, put up his hand and goes, Keith, I'm just doing the math on that. I think that the average person would have to sell 16 days in a year to earn that or something. It was something like that, like a number that like me, one of the top salesperson in the company, I would maybe sell 1 or 2 of those a year, 16 days. I'd normally sold 5 days and people would roll over into the 16 days. Anyway, he asked the question before I could. Okay. But I was thinking it. I was like, this math isn't right. And he got in so much trouble for questioning Keith in front of the leadership. In fact, when I left months later, he was still filling out breach forms and filling out what his plan was to heal how he'd been disrespectful and to heal how he had pulled the most inappropriate whatever. Like he got in trouble for this moment, right? And in my head, I'm like, oh, thank God it wasn't me who asked the question. But they had hired me. I hope this story pays off for you. They had hired me, and by hired, I mean I was working for free because I'm also an actor, right? And I do voiceover, to do a video about this new point system. So the week that I was there last, which was also, by the way, the week that I'd done the Jeunesse training after I'd been branded. So I was like sleep deprived and exhausted and rolled into this studio. So Nancy had like a filming studio in her garage. Nippy's giving me the wrap it up. Okay. So I rolled in and I'm sitting down in the front of the camera and I'm like, hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Edmondson. Do you like points? I love points. I love points on my credit card. I love free coffee at the coffee shop. When you buy 9, get the 10th free. And this is true about me. I do love points. And so I tried to explain this, like when you purchase a new program, you get 10% towards your next program. So Keith comes in to check on me during this process. And this is the last time I saw him. And he says to me, make sure your state is up, that you're in a good state, because it's really important that you're enthusiastic. And that's really the main selling point, because the whole idea is to create an illusion of hope. And I was tired. I was still drinking the Kool-Aid. I just couldn't grok what he was saying. It didn't fully land, but it was a seed that was planted and was eventually part of my wake up a few weeks or maybe a month or so later, where I was like, oh my God, this whole thing is an illusion of hope. And that's what's wrong about it. That's the lie. He dangles this carrot of get to Proctor. As soon as you get to Proctor, you'll get 10% commission. And as soon as you get this, then you can do that. Most people never reach it.
What's stunning to me is that none of this is new. That this story has gone on over and over again, and it is. And I'm coming at it from the multi-level marketing side. I've represented anti-cult activists, but I haven't represented cult victims. I've represented MLM victims. But that story that you just told is like a million stories of people who got roped into rising up the ranks in an MLM. Constantly, with this hope dangling in front of them, and having to portray this positive attitude. I'm thinking of a guy named Eric Scheibler who wrote an ebook called Merchants of Deception. He became an Amway Emerald. So compelling because he's one of those guys who went up on the stage talking about success. Meanwhile, he's basically bankrupt. he is so sucked into this process of having to be positive, stay positive, never ask questions, don't be negative, never question your upline. And I've seen this over and over again with not just with Amway, but with every MLM. There's this sort of relentless positivity.
Yes. Toxic positivity.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to keep up that belief level, both to convince yourself, but to convince the other people in the group, so that there's this world, this sort of sick world where people are not being genuine with each other, which I find profoundly disturbing. I mean, this is not just a financial scam. This is a scam
it's a spiritual one.
Emotional.
It's a spiritual and emotional one.
I totally relate to that. I remember feeling very shackled as I got quite high rank, because most of my friends were below me in rank. So I could never really share with them what was going on. Most of them didn't know what I struggled with until they read my book. And then they were like, oh, I didn't know that you were going through that. I'm like, well, I couldn't tell you. And if I went up rank, I'd get in trouble. I'd get in trouble for being negative. When I told Claire Bronfman
negativity,
that I was upset because they were withholding our commissions for some bullshit reason, and she said I was being entitled.
Yeah.
And which was very confusing to me, because I was like, well, I am entitled to that. I earned it. But also entitlement was what Keith said was one of the worst traits of women. And I was like, well, I don't want to be entitled. So then I have to just shut up and not get paid my commissions. Like, it was really awful. And I really didn't feel like I could tell anyone what was going on for me. And I can see that in the people that I know that are still deeply embedded. And I think, the more we talk, the more I just see it's not even just the parallels. NXIVM was an MLM. I just didn't think it was an MLM because I believed the leadership when they told me it was not an MLM, because MLMs are unethical and what we were doing was ethical.
Yeah. What they call, I guess, what the cult people call a thought-stopping cliche. Just a quick, pat answer to a difficult question that sort of stops any further discussion. There is a couple things that strikes me about, listening to you guys. And one is that all those years that I spent defending Rick Ross and Dr. Martin in the NXIVM case, I never really looked at the multi-level marketing aspect of NXIVM. I mean, because the cases against Rick and Dr. Martin were based on copyright and Lanham Act, unfair competition. The issue of whether NXIVM was a multi-level marketing company or a pyramid scheme, it wasn't an issue in the case.
Right.
So even though I'm a specialist in the MLM area, it wasn't something that I ever looked at. And it's fascinating to hear you talk about the compensation plan and that whole process. There's been this unholy relationship between self-help and MLM.
Yes.
It goes way, way back. Mm-hmm. In fact, some of the earliest MLMs, I'm thinking, there was a company called Coscott Interplanetary, which sold cosmetics, and it was run by a guy named Glenn Turner. Now, Glenn Turner had another company that sold self-help seminars, much like ESP or NXIVM, which was called Dare to Be Great. So he had both things going on. There was another company called Holiday Magic that was an MLM, and the guy who founded that, William Penn Patrick, also had a self-help organization. And you see a lot of the self-help people become speakers at MLM events. You see a lot of these, the sort of the inspirational speakers are hired to give pitches at big extravaganzas held by the MLM companies. But there's this crossover between these two areas, or overlap. Keith Raniere, ended up in both of these areas.
Right. To your point, I had been approached in other MLM things. I'd literally rolled my eyes at it, literally, but not really recognizing that I was in one, but it just seemed not the forefront of what I was doing, because you said you tried it and that wasn't really what you were focusing on. And it didn't seem like it was talked about much. It was just, this is the sales structure, if this is an avenue you want to pursue. And I didn't think much more about it. But when I was approached by anything else that had that feel to it, I was allergic to it almost. So it was particularly, I want to say subtle in a way, but it wasn't the focus because we were mostly indoctrinated into the growth aspect.
Yeah, you didn't have to go up the stripe path. It wasn't
forced. Yeah.
Yeah, people could just be students, but if you wanted to go up the stripe path, that's where the MLM component. But I just
always confusing.
Yeah, I put something together when you said that people who leave MLMs don't talk about it, but we learned about this in our first episode with Dr. Stephen Hassan, this concept of a planted phobia, that if you leave, like within a religious cult, that you'll go blind or you'll die or get cancer or something. But with ours, if you leave, you never work your issues. Like you're a failure, right? You'll never be a success. And I think that's the same thing with an MLM. You're taught that the compensation plan is designed to work. It's got a whole you have a whole business. You're buying into something that's all laid out for you. All you have to do is do it. And so if you don't, you feel like a failure. So most people, either they leave and they don't say anything about it, or they keep trying to buy back the dollar, right? They keep trying to make the investment worth it.
Well, they have equity in it. Yeah.
You've got the equity. So they keep trying to make it work, and they go deeper and deeper and deeper into debt. And I guess if you wouldn't mind summarizing the red flags for people who are joining something and they can't tell it's an MLM.
I get asked this question, how do you protect yourself from this, or how do you get people out of it? And it's a tough issue because usually you're being approached by someone you know. Initially, there's a trust element involved.
Right. Leveraged trust. I've heard that term.
It's tough to say no, and it's also tough to ask questions. If you haven't been approached, one thing is you should ask questions, and you should ask, is this a money-making venture? And how do you make the money? How does that flow? And most of the time, the person recruiting you won't be able to answer that question because they don't understand it themselves yet. You sort of have to keep your guard up. Another thing I'd say, if your gut tells you there's something fishy, you really should listen to your gut. Because I've spoken with a lot of people who said, I thought there was something funny about this, but it was my cousin or it was my best friend, or I went along with it. But I think if they start saying, well, make a list of everyone you know because you're going to want to share this opportunity, I'd say that's a flashing red light there.
Right.
Sure.
And the question is, do you want to stay friends with everybody you know?
Do you want to turn all of your relationships into commercial relationships?
Yes. Do you want all your friends to hate you and never invite you to anything again?
And that always has a stain.
That always has a stain. I mean, listen, I'm still cleaning it up. I have a lot of people in my life who I know have avoided me because of this. And this is part of my cleanup. Let's educate and learn from our mistakes. I learned this from Mike Rinder, episode 3 or 4. I can't change what I did, but I can learn from it and apply it to the future and try to make things better. So here we are. And I so appreciate you. I love that we've found an expert in MLMs, but also somebody with NXIVM experience. And we have a segment. Have you had a chance to listen to our podcast yet, by the way?
No, I haven't. I'm sorry.
You're a busy man. You got more important things to do. But we have a segment. This is actually better.
It's optional.
It's an optional. If this doesn't work for you, we'll cut this out. But we have a bonus segment. Nippy and I often share with each other spontaneously things that really bothered us about what happened that necessarily aren't that big, but really ultimately, Nippy, when you want to explain it?
Every now and then I'll be like brushing my teeth, thinking about what happened. I go, sir, what really chaps my ass? And so the segment has become
what chaps my ass. It's become
ass.
A hashtag. It's become a thing. So what chaps my ass? And I actually spoke about this in another podcast where I was being interviewed, and I want to share this with you because it's MLM related. But the story is, so when you went up the straight path and became a proctor, or decided that you were going to do ESP seriously, if you were a part of an MLM beforehand, you had to not do it anymore. And the reason was told to me is that because if I was a distributor in some company and then I come and do NXIVM, I was going to use NXIVM as a recruiting ground to sell my product to. So we weren't allowed to do another MLM. But when DOS was created and I was invited into something that I was told was totally separate from NXIVM. Okay. Nothing to do with NXIVM. I said straight up to Lauren, is Keith in charge of this women's group? Does he know about it? No, he's got nothing to do with it, blah, blah, blah. Then I was told that part of being in this after I'd taken a vow of obedience is I had to start recruiting people, recruiting my own slaves in this basically I now see as a blackmail MLM scheme. And I'd found out that the person that I would have brought in to be my partner for life had already been recruited by somebody else. And this is a woman who I had brought in. I was her sponsor. So technically she's in my organization or my pyramid, right? And I was so pissed because I realized that the DOS women who came in before me had used the organization that I had built. Keep in mind, Doug, I'm not proud of this, but I brought in like 10% of the entire organization. Not necessarily me personally, but people I knew and that they knew, and my whole organization was 2,000 of the approximately, we don't know if it's 17,000 or 20,000, somewhere in there. 2,000 came in through me. And these women were recruiting through my network. And my coaches and my leaders in Vancouver had been brought into their little subculture MLM thing. So it really chapped my ass that they weren't able to recruit, but they recruited into my friends. And not only that, like, it's not about like, oh, they sold them protein shakes or something. They elicited naked photos from them. They put them in a compromising situation. Women that were friends of mine gave very inappropriate videos that not only were not to other women in a women's empowerment program, they went to Keith for his personal arousal. And that, I mean, I'm in all seriousness, Chaps My Ass was supposed to be a humorous part of our podcast, but this is infuriating to me still to this day. And just to wrap it all up together in a nice little bow, in hearing you and your other interviews and on the Dream podcast, which if anyone wants to know more about MLMs, I highly recommend that whole season about MLMs. I really understood that the history, and I'm going to summarize this in terms of women having careers in sometimes situations where they normally weren't making any money. And now they felt empowered and they were selling product to other women. And there was this bond. That is the worst part of this whole thing. They're selling empowerment, but it's actually enslavement.
Yeah.
And that's how everything ties together for me with this podcast and MLMs and what happened with NXIVM. And now my blood's boiling. So anything else that you want to say on that?
Well, there's a lot. I'd say one thing about not recruiting for other MLMs, that is, again, that's something that happens in every MLM. They don't want you using your network to recruit other distributors. The worst thing that can happen to an MLM company is for a big high-level person to leave and bring all of their downline with them and take it away from the company. So they're very, almost more worried about that than they are being accused of being a pyramid scheme, because that will destroy the company if
that hits them in the wallet.
If you do this cross recruiting. Of course, the other thing, obviously, the rules are always meant to benefit the company. So if there's some reason to violate the rules, then they'll do that. I mean, they'll make an exception to benefit them. Obviously, NXIVM with the pictures or the what was the term that was used?
Collateral.
Yeah, collateral. That puts everything on a whole different level.
Sure. Certainly does. Do you have what chaps your ass, either about MLMs or about your time with Keith, or anything that you have, like a little juicy nugget you'd like to share with us?
I can say I met him once when they had appealed this ruling to the First Circuit. First Circuit had a mediation program that they tried to resolve cases that were on appeal. So he had to come up to Boston with his lawyer. And I just remember this very unassuming, very, chunky little guy. The idea that he became this guru that amazed and that had this devoted following is just totally bizarre. I mean, this would have been in the mid 1990s, and it stunned me when I realized that this was the same guy I had met, many years earlier. It just, I never would have predicted it. That's not my job.
Yeah. Well, you're
good at your job. You're good at your job, and we're lucky to have you. I'm so glad Ken introduced us.
Thanks for your work.
Yeah, thanks for your work. It's important. And you have an ally in us.
And thank you for having me.
Thanks, Douglas.
Thank you. Wow, my head is full of information.
A lot of good information there.
One thing that we didn't touch on, but I did learn about in my prep for this interview, is that the other thing that can happen that's no good in an MLM is that there's a distortion of value in the product itself. So they will say the benefit of being a distributor or an associate or whatever is that you get the product at wholesale. But if you compare that product, whatever it is that you're selling, whether it be cleaner or essential oils or hosiery or jewelry or whatever, compare that to other stuff on the market, and especially somewhere at like, Costco or Walmart where you can, the lowest rate that it could be, and is it of the same quality? And if, of course, the company's gonna say it's of amazing quality and you're getting it at such a good rate and it's the best whatever on the market, do that research, because often there's already inflation and you're actually getting something at retail price. And that's how the company makes money and is able to pay all their commissions, is that they're selling something already inflated to the distributor. So another red flag. But let's wrap it up. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you all.
See you next time on A Little Bit Culty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We're going to be back soon with more episodes of A Little Bit Culty, with more experts and survivors, and sometimes experts who are survivors, and some familiar faces from the vow.
If you got suggestions or questions on upcoming topics, find us on Instagram at A Little Bit Culty.
And for more background on what got me to this point, my memoir, Scarred, True Story of How I Escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life, is available on Amazon, Audible, and wherever books are sold.
If you'd like to help us spread the word about A Little Bit Culty podcast, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends to subscribe.
Like literally take their phone out and press subscribe.
5 stars. That's 5 of them.
We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every major listening app. A Little Bit Culty is executive produced by me, your co-host, Sarah Edmondson, and Anthony Nippy Ames. Associate producer is Jess Tardy. Produced, edited, mixed, and mastered by Citizens of Sound. Our amazing theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant and co-written by Nigel Asselin. Additional original music is composed by Will Rutherford.
We'll be back with more episodes. Until then,
Don't
join a cult.
I'm Sarah Edmondson, and thanks for listening to A Little Bit Culty.